probably going to go ahead and get started just because there is quite a bit of information that I want to cover. And as I said, I do want to leave enough time for questions at the end. Welcome, everybody. Happy 6th of July. I hope that everybody had a wonderful 4th of July holiday weekend. I know we all deserved a long weekend, and I was very thankful for Thursday at 5 o'clock and that for 3 days there wasn't a Zoom meeting in my life, or I really did try to step away from emails even. So I hope you all did too. And again, thanks for making the time this afternoon to join us all. Again, if you can just put yourself on mute till the end, that will be great. I did want to start, as I was putting these together, it's always kind of like, where do I start? So I'm just going to start with some random thoughts from the month of June. So the first one was a little bit of a depression because the summer solstice meant that the days started getting shorter. And I wasn't ready for that because I've really enjoyed the long days, and I don't like to think that we're on the downhill slide towards the shortest day of the year. But it's only been a minute. There's 2 each day, so it's not really noticeable, but that was kind of the first thought that went through my mind with the summer solstice. I also had the thought of what would be the IPM recommendation for a groundhog that completely ate all my newly emerged peas and spinach. Did not touch anything else in my very small garden, but those were 2 of my favorite vegetables. And he just stares at me and laughs at me and taunts me. So looking for IPM recommendations for a groundhog. When did Maine become so hot? There were a couple days where I really thought that I did still indeed live in Florida. My remote office location happens to be on the 2nd floor of my house, and heat does rise, as we all know. And there were a couple Zoom-filled days where I left this office at 87 degrees in the office. And I didn't quite understand how it was possible for Maine to get that hot. I hear that we are looking at, towards the end of the week, some more warm temperatures. I have prepared myself for those so it no longer, because you just get really cranky when it's that hot when you're working in an office. I did have the thought last week when it turned to be July 1 that we're halfway through this year. In a lot of ways, it has felt like 5 years in one, or 5 years in about 4 months, but it's hard to believe that 2020 is halfway over. I think there's a lot of us that look forward to having 2020 be in our rear view, but it's just very bizarre for me to think about that. And I, as you all do, I actually had to turn in my self-assessment of my last year, my own self-evaluation to the provost last week. And when asked that question, I think it's question number 1 on the evaluation, does what you do fit your job description? I realize it doesn't mention anything about crisis leadership or managing through a pandemic. And so again, I go back to that, to the idea that it has been quite a year. So those were my fun random thoughts. I thought, and this came about with the thought that it has been half a year, is oh my gosh, where am I in my goals? And I know many of you set goals probably on January 1. I did too. I think I shared these with you all during my January Extension Connections. My 2 focus areas this year were going to be forward and focus. And I feel like, did I lose sight of those 2 goals? I don't feel like I have. I just feel like certainly everything shifted with COVID, and certainly our priority areas have shifted and whatnot. And when I was thinking about goals, I always think about this Wayne Gretzky quote. It's one of my favorites. You skate to where the puck is going, not where it's been. And I feel like that's what we need to do right now, is figure out where to skate to, where we're going. Again, the world looks a lot different than when it started on January 1, and we had no idea what was going to be in our future and what we were going to have to experience. And I just feel like, let's keep that idea, like, let's keep our eye on the ball and where we're going, even though it's a lot different than what we thought it was going to be. And then I wanted to tie in, number 1, I do love the quote on the right by Martin Luther King, because I do feel like I'm probably a lot like you all, is how do we even think about reopening? How do we think about restarting? It just, again, I've said this out loud, it seemingly was a lot easier to move to a remote location than it is to move back to an actual office location or a program location or to start a program. And so I just think we got to remain, again, focused in a positive direction and take one step at a time. This, one of my favorite quotes is, you can't eat an elephant by one bite at a time. And that's all we're going to do, is we're going to take a bite at a time at all of this. And we're going to certainly talk more about the restart later on in my extension connections. But again, we'll just keep our heads down and moving forward as best we can. So I did want to mention that. And again, I use this quote by Martin Luther King Jr. because I don't want to lose sight of our commitment to continuing the discussions that we started last month. If you all remember, last month I started this Extension Connections with not knowing really what to say in reaction to the killing of George Floyd and the protests that were happening. And I think we were all just, where are we in this world? What are we thinking about? How are we reacting? And so it's taken just about a month, but we ordered close to 100 books, which was amazing to me. When I put out the offer, I figured maybe we'd get 10 or 20 people, but in the end, we got a lot more than that. And in doing so, we actually had to put a second order in. That contacted me a little later on in the process. We may not have gotten you a book now, but we are going to get you a book. We have a second order. Books were mailed out last week. I actually got a couple emails over the weekend that people had started receiving them. So I was very pleased about that. What I just want to mention is, as I talked about before, we are going to do some sort of facilitated discussion on this book if you want to join in on it. We're just trying to figure out the best way to do that with possibly the number of people that we would have. So it's a fruitful and productive discussion that means something. And so I just want to mention that, just to stay tuned for some follow-ups on how we're going to facilitate that discussion. And again, you should be getting your book sometime this week if you haven't already done so. Before I get started on our restart, reopening, and whatnot, again, I do want to celebrate some milestones that are happening in July. I'm very thankful that I get copied on these emails now to know, again, years of service and retirements. And so I just want to, again, give a shout out for folks who are celebrating pretty significant milestones as far as being part of Extension. Mark Hutchinson, Jennifer Lobley, Joyce Weaver, and Diane Russell, thank you so much for your many years of service to this organization. I am thankful for your contributions and for you all being a part of Extension. And I also, I'm very happy when folks retire so they can go do all the fun things that people say, oh, I'm going to do that once I retire. And so Kathy Hopkins will be retiring at the end of this month. And again, just want to thank her profusely for all the years of service that she has given to Extension, and really wish her all the best in retirement. Again, she's still got a couple weeks, but I just wanted to make those widely known across the organization. So again, as you connect with some of these folks, you can say congratulations, thank you. And we really need to do a better job. And again, still trying to figure out what that looks like to celebrate all the great things that are happening here in Extension. So what took up the majority of my time in June? A lot of email and a lot of Zoom. It's amazing. It hasn't slowed down any. I haven't heard anybody that has said that their life has slowed down. I don't know why we thought that maybe, that maybe it would. Sorry about that. I clicked too quickly. I mentioned this before. I'm loosely affiliated with one of the subcommittees of the Maine Economic Recovery Committee. I put the link here, and again, I'm going to share all these links in a follow-up email that will go out to you once we're done with this Extension Connection, so you'll have all the links in a handy spot. I would really encourage you, if you have any interest in how the governor is thinking about spending the $1.25 billion that came to the state of Maine through the CARES Act funding, I encourage you to get on the website, which I've shared here, and again, I'll share in an email. The full Economic Recovery Committee meetings are certainly open to the public. They happen on Friday mornings, and they get really good speakers to come in and share information. Also, the documents that the subcommittees are providing to the full committee are available, and the full committee's recommendations are available as well. And again, if you have any interest in where some of this money is going and how decisions are made, I encourage you to follow along and be a part of it. I mentioned this before, I'm providing a supporting role to the Manufacturing and Natural Resource-Based Industry Subcommittee. And by that, it's really food, fiber, and fisheries with the natural resource-based industries. And it's been fascinating, and I've learned a lot. Certainly, extension has been talked about a lot with what you all are doing to aid the people of the state of Maine throughout this crisis. But there's going to be some other opportunities, and I think some opportunities that will benefit us in the long run through possible some grant funding or state funding when we look to the future. And again, this committee has a twofold charge. Number one is providing short-term recommendations to get the state through this crisis, and then longer-term recommendations to look at the future of the state of Maine. So again, I just put that out there. It's taken up a lot more time than I thought, but I've learned a lot. And again, I think it's going to be actually really useful for us moving forward. One of the other things I think it's important to mention, we tend to focus on our state budget allocation, certainly through the university, because that's where our budget reductions are taken. Where possibly could there be external funds or extra funds or additional funds that come to extension? And one of them is there's a hope that there will be a fourth funding bill for COVID at the federal level. And so if there is actually a piece in there that would go to extension and the ag experiment stations. And with that, there were 4 individuals, 2 ag experiment station directors and 2 directors of extension, myself and Chuck Ross from the University of Vermont, that actually provided commentary to the staff members of the Ag Appropriations Committee at the federal level last week to talk about the impacts of COVID on extension, what we're able to do. And so it was just a great opportunity, number one, for Maine to get some exposure, which I think sometimes we get, the bigger states are usually the ones that get to do that. But it was excellent to work with those other 3 individuals to really work on our messages and really think about what would resonate with these staff members that really are able to influence their legislators' mind on this funding. So fingers crossed that there may be some additional funds that could come our way from some of these federal pieces of legislation. We also, and many of you participated in it, and I'm thankful for your participation. We did our first faculty interview for one of the crop specialist positions in Aroostook County, all by Zoom, because that's the way we live right now. And so again, I just want to say thank you to all who participated. The first time that we'd ever done anything like that, to the point of phone camera tours of the Presque Isle office and of Libby Hall or some other locations around campus. It's very strange to think about interviewing for a position that you actually haven't been able to visit. And again, I just think everybody did an extraordinary job of trying to figure out how to make this work and how we could best show not only the university, but Aroostook County off to our potential candidates. So again, I just want to thank everybody who participated. I know I was part of the presentations, and it was great to see 30, 40, 50 people on those Zoom presentations for those candidates. I keep getting too excited here, sorry. We do have a new provost, and as I mentioned in my emails, I think we couldn't have asked for a better decision in this regard. He comes from the University of Connecticut. Most recently, he is a fisheries and forestry faculty member formally I asked my counterpart at UConn what to expect, and he was very positive about John Volan and said he's a good friend of Extension. He understands what Extension's all about. I feel like we're already so far ahead of the game with this. I've reached out to him. He's excited when we can do so safely to travel around the state and learn about Extension and visit as many places as he can. And I'm even going to try, he is officially getting started at the midpoint of August, but I'm going to try to see if he might be willing to join the August Extension Connections, if nothing else, just to say hello. If he can't do that in August, then certainly we'll get him as connected as possible with you all, just for an introduction and some questions and whatnot. But I'm really excited that we have a full non-temporary, like, he's going to be here. I think he's going to be great, and I look forward to working with him. And then obviously June was consumed as everybody starts figuring out how do we do this? How do we start thinking about restarting and reopening? What are the mechanisms in place? We're going to talk about those. What are the questions? And again, remember, we've never done this before with either an extension or the university or the system. So yeah, it's been a process, and I think it will continue to be a process. Before we get into that, you did get a link last week. I'm only a couple weeks behind because of all the emails and the Zooms, but we did get the link to the organizational survey sent out. It will go out again this afternoon in my follow-up email. Please take the time to do it. I really would like to try to get as close to 100% participation in the survey as I can, because it's so important to hear what's on your minds. How are you approaching all of this? What does it look like? And then again, as we start looking towards the future of Extension and what Extension looks like after COVID and after, again, a game changer. Life's not going to be the same. And what does that look like? And so this is my very public plea to take the time to complete the survey. You know, if you just ran through it and clicked some boxes and gave some one-word answers, you know, it's probably going to take you about 10 or 15 minutes, and that's fine. Again, as you want to participate, do whatever you want. If you want to be thoughtful and probably provide some more robust answers, it may take you a little longer. So I just want to mention that in case you're wondering, what is it gonna look like? Time commitment. My plan is after all the surveys are completed, and again, I'm going to leave this open through July because I know people are on vacation, and again, as we are all consumed with our own like reopening and restarting process, I'm going to leave it open through July, and then start looking at the responses in August, and then do some probably Zooms, town hall type Zooms around some theme areas, and again, looking at what the next steps for this all look like. So again, just wanted to put a plug in for that. So reopening and restarting. What I do want to mention is, before we get into a lot of the details and a lot of the questions, and I shouldn't have said a lot of the details because I don't know if I have a lot of details, but before we get to a lot of your questions, I just want to share with you all what my guiding principles are moving forward, and I'm hopeful that we could all adopt them, because I think it's going to be so critical as we figure all of this out and as we work together to get back into our offices or to get our programs back going in person. So I'm just going to go through these with my thoughts, and again, it's going to be something to think about, something to remember, and something to have kind of in the back of our minds as we're marching through July, when there's going to be a lot of work done on this at our level. Number one, I think what's most important to remember is flexibility. We have to be flexible. We like this. I feel like there is no hard and fast like rule, hard and fast. It's flexible. It's, as we know, I go back to almost the bottom one. Some of the decisions that were made last week are going to change next week. You know, it's realizing that we don't have a date that we're all going to be back. Like all of Extension across the state of Maine is going to be back in an office. I don't know what that date is. So we just have to remind ourselves that we need to be flexible. I think the other part of this is once we are back in our offices, we have to be flexible with what that looks like. And again, I still remember the days, and you all, some of you, how about that, probably remember them too, is the idea of, well, we've got to be in our offices. The expectation is that we're in our offices from 8 to 5 o'clock unless we have programs, and then we may come in an hour late or, you know, leave an hour early. But there was always that expectation that I have to be in the office. And certainly for a lot of folks, that is true. That's where the majority of your responsibilities are. You're the front-facing person that greets people when you walk into the office. We get that, but there's also some flexibility that goes along with that. How do we welcome people to our offices? What does it look like? Can I continue to work from home even if our office is reopened? Again, these are all questions that we're trying to figure out the answers to, and I think it's just a reminder of flexibility. And as offices, expectations, I think we need to be pretty open about how we expect others, how we're working with others. And again, those will come out in our reopening plans and whatnot, but I just share the idea of let's be flexible because it's going to be, I think, going to be necessary. Let's be patient with the process and the people. We've already run into some instances where this reopening process is not immediate and you don't get immediate answers. And I've had a couple of programs that have applied through the EOC to get approval to restart in July prior to, you know, the majority of extension going back, and it has been a slow moving process. We can't do much about that, unfortunately. And so it's just important to be patient with the process and, again, with the people who are working on this. I think the other thing to remember too is it is a process and we need to abide by it. This is not something where we can be like, oh, well, you know what, they'll never know, it's extension, we get away with a lot of things because we're far away from main campus, a lot of our offices are. But again, extension's visibility has certainly been increased through the last 4 months. And with that, there's a lot of increased scrutiny. And so we need to play by whatever rules are coming down from certainly the university and the system. We can't just decide we're going to start up, you know, fill in the blank. We need to do it through the proper channels with the proper authority, just so we don't get in trouble later, or I don't get in trouble later. We are going to work together through this, again, being flexible and patient, but remembering that we need to do this. It is a group effort. I am very thankful. We're going to talk about the subcommittees that have been formed by you all because you volunteered to be on those subcommittees. And again, I'm grateful for that because we have voices from across the state that are going to be part of the process in making some of the decisions about how we reopen and how we restart. I think it's important, and actually, President Farini Mundy mentioned this in her phone call this morning. We are never going to be the same as we were, let's say, March 12th. We aren't. The university is not the same. Extension won't be the same. And we just have to know that. Like, we are never going to go back to how life exactly was prior to COVID. So let's look forward. It goes back to my, let's just look to where the puck is going, because that's going to be the important thing. We're going to remain adaptable, open, and positive, or remind ourselves to do so, or remind me to be that way. It's hard. I'm not going to lie, especially when it's 87 degrees in my home office after about 8 hours of Zoom calls. It's hard to remain open and positive about much, but we've got to through the process. We know that change is constant. Decisions are evolving and unknowns are increasing. And that, again, is certainly the way things are looking. I think we're going to talk about, well, what are the hard and fast rules? What are the guidelines? And again, just remember this, change is constant and decisions are evolving. And again, I think for everything that we can answer, there's about 5 more questions that arise from that. And at the end of the day, we're all doing our best. Nobody is trying to be frustrating. Nobody's trying to be belligerent, again, except for me when it's 87 degrees. I digress, but we're all really trying very hard. And so just remember that as as you get frustrated through this process, or if there are things that come up, we just need to, again, keep all of these things in the back of our mind. And I'm going to come back to them possibly in an email, or again, in a month from now, just as a general reminders as we move through this process. So I wanted to start with some questions that we all have, or we have all thought about, or we're beginning to hear, to try to just say, all right, this is what we know right now. One of the first questions actually came this morning, and it was point blank, like, when am I going to be invited back to work? If you look at the guidelines on the UMaine website, it's you cannot return to work until you have an invitation to do so. Well, who issues that invitation, and when am I going to be invited back? Basically, for extension, I believe that would be me issuing that invitation. And at this point in time, I haven't invited anybody back to work. And if you look at my background, I am not there either. So this is part of the process that I'm going to get to in about a slide or two about what we have in place to start slowly and gradually returning folks back to their offices after getting approval from all the levels that we need to get approval from. So you haven't missed a memo, you haven't missed an email, you haven't missed any sort of invitation. They haven't come yet. We are working on that process as we speak. And again, I'm going to outline that here in a moment. Somebody asked me this, where are the specific reopening guidelines? They're not really specific reopening guidelines. I'm going to share, again, the links that I shared last week in my email after the chancellor's announcement and the president's announcement. There are a couple actually PDFs that are really good and probably answer a lot of questions that you may have. I'm going to, again, share them here in a minute. I'm also going to reshare them in an email just so you have them. But right now, again, there are no real specific reopening guidelines for our extension offices or programs. We are actually putting those guidelines together, again, as we speak. Another question, certainly after July 1, it's a new fiscal year, so has my T-card been turned back on? Has my P-card? What's happening with spending? What can we do? Basically, we're still working under the limits that we were working under prior to June 30th. And so there has been no increases in spending, increases in amounts. We're getting permission to purchase certain things and authorize certain travel and whatnot. So again, I would strongly encourage you, if you have questions about spending, I think you've been directing those to Dennis. You can certainly ask some at the end of this Extension Connections, but right now we have not received any sort of notification or communication about any of the changes in spending or purchasing that affect us currently. Positions, the process continues that we are working under, meaning positions have to get chancellor approval, even if they are temporary or soft money funded. We're expecting that there's probably going to be another call possibly this week or next week for new position requests, which means if we've had a position request in the past, we can resubmit it if it hasn't been filled. This is where I have to go back to the guiding principles and remember to be patient and remember that people are trying to do their 100% best. But this process, as you all know who have submitted positions, has been one of the more frustrating ones of this time. But just so you know, the process continues. If you have position requests, work through your PA to try to get those on our list for when we are asked to submit new positions. Travel, there has been no real change in travel other than, for the most part, folks are free to move around the state, but again, we're still under travel restrictions to a point and travel reimbursements and all of those things. There is still no authorized out-of-state travel for state employees. If you do have a request or a need to travel out of state, but still within the United States, You have to, again, get approval through the chancellor, and I have to march that process along. If there is something coming up this fall that you believe you will need to be at in person, I would encourage you to reach out to me via email as soon as possible, because again, it's not an easy process and it does take some time. So if you think you may need to travel out of state on extension related business, just please shoot me an email so we can have a conversation about that to see whether we want to start the process. Supposedly there is going to be some further guidelines on out of country travel for next year. And again, the system website did put up some guidelines as far as when you could start making travel plans. I believe it's March of 2021. I should have looked that up before here, but again, we can work through, but just for right now, we're still really limited as far as travel goes. I've been asked about contact tracing, especially as we think about restarting programs and keeping track of participants and whatnot. The system and the university is working on that. And I think we will follow whatever guidelines they come up with when our programs do start. At this point in time, we are asking, certainly if you are traveling, to provide some sort of service to let us know where you're going and who you're connecting with, just so we have record of that. But there may be a more formalized process, especially as we get up and going with more smaller group programs, of how to keep track of participants and, again, who we've been in contact with, just in case. Been asked a couple times now, and I feel like there's probably more people who have this question. I actually asked it of Joan this morning during our president's or during her meeting. She's going to get more information on it. Obviously, you all heard the news that there is going to be COVID testing available for some students. It's not universal testing, so not everybody's getting a test before they arrive back on campus, whether it's students, faculty, or staff. It's going to be specific groups. I'm not sure if it's going to be out-of-staters, folks coming in from out of the country. There's more. They're working on those guidelines right now. But they are aware that certainly there are University of Maine employees across the state, and what would that look like for COVID testing around the state. So I think that's one that they are currently working on, and there should be more information at some point about that. There's a lot of questions, and again, around HR, and certainly we can ask if Farron's available after, when we get to the question portion here. You know, if I know there's a lot of questions like, I'm working great remotely, can I continue to do so? Do I have to come back? Do I have to apply to come back? There's a lot of questions about returning, and again, if there are health issues or other reasons why you may not be able to return, what does it look like to return? There is some information in one of the PDFs that I shared again last week in that email, and that I'm going to reshare this afternoon, about gaining approval, but there's just still a lot of questions. And so I just share this to let you know if you're questioning that as well. We don't have all the specific answers right now, but we're working on that. And then this morning, I thought this was interesting because this was kind of in the back of my head, and I'm certain that it may be in the back of a lot of your heads, is, all right, let's say we all get back to our offices in some way, shape, or form. We start our programs up in some way, shape, or form. What would trigger a campus shutdown and all of us to go home again? And so they're actually working on what that looks like. Like, what would it take for the campus to say, we're all working remotely again? So I will keep you all informed of what that looks like, or what that may be. Certainly there are other states, as you all have been watching the news, that I think have made really bad choices, and numbers are increasing, and that's going to impact a lot of programs, a lot of universities, whether they come back or not. Right now, again, it's all systems go to welcome students back on campus in August, and so I don't see that changing unless a lot of numbers change. But again, that was a question asked of Joan, and she's like, I've got to come up with a response to answer that when people ask that question. So I just share that all with you in case you've been wondering that very same thing. So what is our process? Where are we at? From Last extension connections, we were, I mentioned the EOC and the hierarchy of controls document and all of this. We've made some strides. Again, we're moving forward. What we did as a leadership team was really think about, okay, what are the areas that we really need to have strong guidelines for? If we think about extension and we think about getting people back to their offices and restarting programs, what are we looking at? So we determined we had 4 functional areas that we that would be obviously our county offices. What does it look like to restart county offices? That would be our campus locations, both on campus and off campus. So certainly our on-campus locations like Libby Hall, but think about off-campus locations like our DRL lab, like our 4-H Science and Engineering Center. So we have county offices, campus, our camps, our 4-H camps and learning centers, and then we have our youth and adult programming. So we have these 4 areas. We have a member of the ELT who is serving as chair of those 4 areas. And then again, I asked you all in Extension Connections to volunteer, and I am so thankful for all of those who did volunteer. We got a wonderful response, and we actually have good participation from across the board. And it really worked out well. We have county office staff who are working on county offices, again, camps. Thank you all who have participated and who are working on these. What's going to happen is each of these committees is going to come up with the general guidelines for reopening and restarting for their particular area. I'll use the county office committee as an example. What they are going to do is they're going to sit down and say, okay, if we looked at our county offices across the board, here's what we need to do to reopen. Here are the considerations we need to make. And what they're going to do is they're going to come up with that hierarchy of control checklist, and they're going to come up with some guidelines for reopening. We're going to submit those to the EOC, the Emergency Operations Committee, to get their approval. Once they approve them, then we can come back and we can then say to our county offices, okay, here, folks, these are the things that we need to make sure we can check off that we have done or that we're going to do to open. And again, realizing that every county office is a little bit different, but there are generalities, there are commonalities that cut across all the county offices. So then we can work individually with each county office to get them reopened, and we may not have to, we're still working with the EOC on this, if we have to submit a whole plan for each office, or if we get deputized once we give them our restarting general plan. Again, I will follow up with you all on that, but we're working in these 4 functional areas. That's step number 1, is to just get the general guidance for each of these areas by the EOC with their approval, and then we'll work on the next step is tailoring those plans to each one of our offices and to each one of our programs. Again, this is going to take the next few weeks. We may have some folks back in their offices by the end of July. We may have some folks back in their offices by mid-August. There is no, like, we don't have any sort of hard and fast timeline from UMaine. I don't have one that we've all got to be back to work in our offices by July 31. This just goes to show it is a process. We're working through it, and certainly we'll keep everybody informed throughout the month of what it looks like and what's happening. I mentioned this again, and I really just cut and pasted this from the email because it really, well, I am too quick with my finger. It really does help, I think, answer some questions and really realize the work that's being done behind the scenes, both at the system and at the university level. So there is the Together for Maine Safe Return and Learning Principles. That's from the system level. And again, I'm going to share these all in my email this afternoon. There is a scientific advisory board that is making the recommendations to the leadership on all these decisions. And there's a really interesting, if you want to learn the science behind some of these decisions, I encourage you to watch that YouTube video. It's not very long. Again, there is a new system website about the safe return, and then there's a new UMaine website on UMaine's return, and I have that bookmarked. because I refer to it quite a bit because, again, it provides some really good information about returning. And again, it's more UMaine specific. And I give you, I'm just kind of circling through this, the Return to Work Training Guide and other materials, and the link. There is another PDF which has a lot of really good information in it. And there is an online training that you can do in addition to it, or with it, excuse me. And we're being told that all employees are expected to go through this training prior to returning to their office. Now, again, I don't know exactly how all that works, but it does have some really good information. At least I have not been through the online training. I think Lisa has, but I have started going through the document, and it is very useful, and it may answer some of the questions that you may have as well. Looking ahead to July, I just want to mention a couple of things. As I said, we're really going to be working on, the big committee recommendations to get those approved by the EOC, and then how we get other individualized plans together for each county office, for each program, for all of those things. I do want to mention that I have been contacted by folks who have a program that they may want to restart sooner than what this process may take. And what do I mean by that? They may want to do something at the end of July or even in August. And if that's the case, then I encourage you to work with your PA, and then who will then loop me in to try to get that program approved, or at least started through the process. So again, if there's something that you think you have to do in person with a group, contact us and we'll work with you on starting the process of that, because again, it may take several weeks to get approved. And then don't want to lose sight of the fact that we're focusing on some other things other than restarting and reopening. We've had some really great conversations around micro-credentialing and certificate programs of extension, especially now that a lot of our programs are online. So you're going to begin to hear some more information on that. We've certainly had I've had a lot of requests, and we know the need is out there for some instructional design help. We're working on that to see what we can do to provide some short-term and possibly some longer-term solutions around putting programs online and really thinking about maybe you want to utilize Brightspace that is now available. What can we do to help support folks in those efforts? We're also having some conversations again around revenue generation. This is in a couple different areas. One, I'll go back to the online programming. Now that we have some of our programs online, is there a way that we can make them available to folks outside the state and generate some revenue for these programmatic areas? We've just had a lot of conversations, and certainly I'm open to really thinking about where are we going to increase our budgets. Again, I go back to the idea of if our state budget continues to decrease because of COVID or other reasons, where can we actually make some gains in our budget? And so open to all ideas. And I put budget being the last thing. We still haven't actually received final word on what budget scenario we submitted that has been accepted and what the budget situation looks like. I think people are being very quiet. They're, again, wondering what's going to happen with students returning this fall. How many are coming back? Will the freshman class all come if all their classes possibly are online? There's a lot of unknowns, so that will continue to stay certainly on my radar screen as well. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just start hopefully answering questions that you all might have as best I can. And if not, we'll certainly write them down and get responses as soon as we can. So, and I talked in one long rambling sentence too, as I do each one of these. So any questions?
Hannah, this is Carla from Hancock County. I have a couple questions.
Okay.
There was something I read a little while ago saying that anyone over the age of 65 or who had, the CDC the list of things that make you at risk should continue to work from home, which is different than may continue or must continue. So I'm just wondering if there's any further guidance on that or what we could expect for that. And then the second thing I'm wondering about, which isn't really a question, but more a discussion, I guess, is just as a parent and thinking about school and childcare and what's up for the fall. Like, I assume, I would hope that we would have some flexibility when we learn what's happening with school this fall,
Yes.
and what that means for us coming back to work and our schedules and things like that.
Yeah, and Carla, and thank you for, now, once I stopped sharing my screen, I could see the chat box. So thank you for putting the survey link there too. Those are two really good questions. And actually, I feel almost useful that I have responses to both of them, because both of them were asked during this morning's president's call. And certainly, Fran, if you know anything else too, chime in. But somebody asked that the very same question of the guidance was 65 or older. The guidance has actually now been revised to just say, I believe it's something around the fact of if you are, and I don't even know if they use the right words. This was 8 o'clock this morning, but if you are older and want to consider working from home, so they no longer put an age, like the 65 or older is out, and now it's just if you are of an older age range with no firm numbers. And so that is part of the further guidelines that we're kind of waiting on. In the PDF that I mentioned, the training PDF, there is some specific guidance about if you want to seek supervisor approval to continue to work from home, you can, but there's some conflicting guidance in that I think they're supposed to get straightened out, and I'm going to defer to Fran here in a second. The second one is childcare, and that is a concern across campus. And if school systems are, for whatever reason, not back, there is going to be a lot of flexibility around work, and because realizing that people are going to have to make adjustments due to childcare. So just know that that is certainly, that's a huge concern across campus right now. But Fran, if you have any other about the 65 or older.
Yeah, that was the language that I last read, that older as a category, as opposed to putting a number. And so this at-risk group who feels they might not be able to return due to being at risk, first would discuss with their supervisor, and then there was a link to a form to fill out that would go to your HR partner. And I think the question right now is, if the supervisor approves and everything works, do you still have to fill out that form? So I'm working that through. I think to be safe, at this point, if someone was asking me what to do, I'd say talk to your supervisor and fill out the form. So that piece. And then with children at home, the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act paid leave does extend through the end of the year. So that is an approach that might be the right thing for someone who has children to care for, and that you could apply for that at any time. And those links and information still exist on the portal.
Thank you, Fran. And thank you, Carla, for the great questions. I know there have to be other ones. I cannot have answered everybody's question about what this may look like.
This is Marjorie from Hancock County. You mentioned near the end there a scenario where students might come back, but all of their classes could be online. Why on earth would we be asking them to come back? If I'm unclear on what we're asking of faculty on campus. Are they supposed to be prepared to teach in person and online and both?
Yes. Bottom line, Marjorie, they are. It is fascinating to be part of these conversations, and there are a lot of times, every day I thank goodness that I work with Extension, because I think we all think we have our own unique challenges and opportunities, but man, right now, all faculty members are being told that they're, if they think they're teaching an in-person class, they still have to make arrangements or have it be available online at a moment's notice. And they're, for the most part, and my statistics or my numbers may not be exactly right, but it'll give you an example. Because of student numbers in a classroom are down, there's only certain classes that will be able to be taught in person, just because, you know, if you had a 100-seat class before, that 100-seat class is now, you can have 30 people in those seats because of social distancing requirements. So for some classes, there's going to be an in-person and online version. So you may be there in person, you may be online. For some classes, they're going to actually have, on Mondays, you show up in person. On Wednesdays, you're going to do the online version. But they're also taking into account the idea that there is going to be COVID on campus. Like, that's the conversation. And I'm not trying to be fatalistic or anything like that, but they know that COVID will be coming, and that how are we going to deal with that if we get a dorm that somehow has 20 students now that are sick and that whole dorm is under quarantine, then that class may pivot to online because there's nobody to go in person, or that they have people in quarantine. The other thing to remember is currently students will begin on August 31, and at Thanksgiving they are going to go home and finish the semester at home, and all their exams will be online. They do not want students returning, and the question has been is, will they return in the spring? And again, that's something that they're looking at. This is more answer to your question, but it just made me think about that. You know, the messaging has been students are going to return to campus, and that's what the plan is. And that's what we've been told as far as extension programs go, is right now, extension never closed. And again, we go back and forth, but we've been working right along. We didn't close. We just changed our work situation and our work environment. And so when they say we're going to welcome students back on campus in August, that's been kind of what we've been told as far as extension goes, is we're going to welcome, you know, our clientele groups back in a safe manner as well as we can, to show that, you know, we're here and that we're continuing to do the good work that we've been doing. So again, it was a very long-winded answer to your question, but yes, all faculty are expected to provide both types of education this fall.
Thank you.
We are working on deliveries as people are thinking of their other questions. We are working on getting materials and supplies and whatnot delivered to our off-campus locations. I know Dennis has been working on that. And again, I just want to remind folks that this is order number 1. 40,000 more face masks have been ordered as of today. They are going to have face masks available at different locations around campus. And of course, we want to make, you know, face masks available in offices if people come in and don't have them and need one. So just know that the materials and supplies you get in this first order certainly are not the last that you will get.
And I don't know if you can see the chat or not. This is Angela, but Sheila Norman is wondering if it's still possible to join one of the 4 committees.
Absolutely. I'm sure our chairs would welcome more input and more help. So Sheila, if you just want to reach out to me in regards to what you have an interest in, and for anybody who may want to join those committees, if you just want to email me with what your interest area would be, I'll connect you with the chairperson of the committee. Thank you. I clearly can't do 2 things at once anymore, so I should. Thank you for that, Angela. And I see I have help in my groundhog. That's what we do in extension. We provide answers. Anything else? I have 2 other things that I just remembered. Again, you're going to get a follow-up email with all the links that I mentioned. The other thing you're going to do is get an email probably tomorrow. I should have mentioned this as we were talking about the book and whatnot, but our commitment to civil rights. We have a message that is going out tomorrow, prioritizing our commitment to civil rights and with the civil rights training information that's happening at the end of the month. So be on the lookout for that. And the other thing is, I've said this all along, and I'm hoping that you all are doing so, is that it is summertime. It kind of freaks me out a little bit because as I was growing up, it was the first week of August was the Northern Maine Fair. The second week of August, we went back to school and we started banking the house for wintertime because the house had to be banked before potato harvest started. So I worry that summer is passing us by. And so this is just the reminder again, everybody needs a break. Make sure to take your time this summer to enjoy the beautiful state that we live in, and take some time to decompress. And I think that helps a lot, even just in a 3-day weekend, to come back and be ready to take on all these opportunities that we have to take. And again, that's just a prettier word than challenges. So just that helpful reminder to remember to take some time off this summer. And again, there will be an extension newsletter. Thank you again to the communications and marketing team for continuing to do the stellar work that you all are doing. And we'll have a newsletter out next week. This is, I just saw, made me laugh, Lynn, thank you. I was hoping that our Zoom free day on June 26th was a success and everybody enjoyed having maybe a little time off from Zoom. There may be another one in our future. If I could figure out how to do an email free day, that would be higher up on my priority list, but I just don't see that that's possible. But I am certainly open to trying out another one in July. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for the nudge, Lynn, I appreciate that. Any final questions for the good of the group? And again, I'm going to continue my email messages probably Mondays and Fridays, Wednesdays if there's material to share. So we'll keep you as informed as we can as the month marches on, certainly, and as we make some decisions and have more information. So please continue to read the emails. And if there's nothing else, be quiet for a second. All right, then. I hope everybody has a great rest of your day, great rest of your week. And again, thank you all for the tremendous work you're all doing. And I look forward to seeing you all hopefully next month, if not sooner, on some Zoom meeting in the future. So take care, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
Hannah.